Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jason Levine, Principal Worldwide Evangelist for Adobe Creative Cloud. And in this 6-part series, this being part 2, How to Make Great Video, today we're going to cover how to fix common video and audio issues that you will likely encounter regardless of what you shoot with. So whether you're shooting with your iPhone or you're shooting with a pro camera or a DSLR or anything, capturing audio from said cameras or perhaps capturing it with a secondary audio device. There's lots of little cool things that you can do just to kind of improve the sound, improve the look, and fix some common problems. Things like handheld footage, which is inherently shaky. It needs to be stabilized. Very easy to apply stabilization both on the Premiere Pro side and in After Effects, which we're actually going to start with today. Also, not only will we be showcasing new video techniques and editing features every week, I'll also be featuring a different coffee cup. Last week it was Winnie the Pooh. This week it is the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. So important stuff, I know, important stuff. Okay, so let's start here in After Effects and talk about actually a new feature that just came to After Effects called Camera Shake Deblur. And actually, we're going to work on this clip here. So let me go ahead. The first thing you're going to do when you want to begin working in After Effects is we're going to take this video that I have here, and I'm going to drag it down onto the new composition icon here. And this will automatically make a composition for me in the correct frame size, frame rate, aspect ratio. If you're completely new to After Effects, much like I showed you last week in Premiere when we were talking about getting started there, you can also right-click or control-click on a video inside After Effects project panel and choose New Comp from Selection. So this is very similar to doing the new sequence from clip. Same kind of concept. You can either right-click, control-click, and use New Comp from Selection, or you can drag it down as I showed you here. Oh, and it's kind of right hidden above my head there. I don't know if you're seeing the tooltip. Let's see. You see the tooltip? There you go. Create a new composition. So as I've said, lots of ways to do the same operations, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Okay, so let's go ahead and play this footage back. So this was shot by an Adobe, very super loud there, Adobe colleague of mine. And you can see, obviously, handheld, probably, my guess, probably iPhone footage or something like that. And it's fairly shaky. Now, aside from being fairly shaky, it also suffers from some of the artifacts of being handheld and shaky, which is you've got very blurry frames. And you can see here just right on the clock tower and just along the edges, it's not sharp. So stabilization can sort of control the movement, right? But it doesn't necessarily fix any of the blur. So maybe that's where we start. Now I'm going to show you more of what we call our warp stabilizer in both Premiere and After Effects. So we're going to get to just kind of stabilizing footage later. This being a new feature, though, I wanted to really showcase to you how cool this is and get you thinking about how useful this can be in your production workflow. All right. So let's go ahead first and stabilize this clip. Now, once again, you've got a lot of different ways that you can do this. Now, in both Premiere and After Effects, we have something called Warp Stabilizer. On the After Effects side, it's referred to as Warp Stabilizer VFX, largely because we just give you more information. Stabilization is all about sort of tracking points in the frame and figuring out how to stabilize and how to potentially rescale and then recrop to fit the frame. So you're going to find that you have more options here. Again, if we wanted to apply the warp stabilizer to this clip to kind of fix that handheld shakiness of it, right-click, control-click on the clip in the comp, and you'll see that you have Warp Stabilizer VFX, and we can apply it that way. Or you can go up to the Effects and Presets panel. Now, again, your workspaces may look a little bit differently. This is one that I kind of customized for the stream based off of the default workspace. Effects and Presets panel. If you type in Warp down in the Distort menu, here you'll see Warp Stabilizer VFX, and you can drag that right onto the video clip inside the comp. Now, when you do that, what's going to happen is it's going to begin analyzing in the background. It's going to analyze all of those handheld shaky frames. And if you look up here in the effects controls, it's actually processing this right now. Now, what's essential about telling you that it's happening in the background, and what's cool about that and what you should know as an editor compositor is that this means that you can work on other comps in After Effects. Similarly, you can work on other sequences in Premiere because it's processing in the background. And depending upon the length of your clip, the size, obviously if it's 720p versus 2160p, it'll take a little bit longer or less time, to stabilize, again, just depending upon the nature of the media. So like that, though, in the amount of time it told me, allowed me to tell you about that, I'm all tongues this morning. It's been stabilized. So let's go ahead, we'll wind this back, and let's play it back now. All right. And right away, you can see that it's definitely more stable. I mean, it's hardly moving at all. It's actually quite nice. Now it's catching up to real time here. Wait until this sort of cache all those frames. There we go. All right. So it looks pretty good, but you can see there's still a couple of frames that are blurry. That really, again, it fixed the motion. And if we were just using this as a quick cutaway, we could probably get away with it. But there's a couple frames that I just don't like. Now, I just want to point out one thing here while we're doing this so you can kind of see the before and after in real time. After Effects has what's known as uninterrupted preview, much like uninterrupted playback in Premiere. So inside the effects controls, if I turn off the warp stabilizer, it keeps playing. So here it is without the stabilizer. And if I turn it back on, there it is stabilized. Before and after. And I laugh because this is the, if you ever watched Blazing Saddles, the gunslinger, he's like, oh no, this is my shooting hand, So you can see really, I mean, I like to think when I'm shooting with my iPhone that I'm pretty steady, but your body moves, right? You're breathing, you're inhaling, your shoulders. So it's kind of amazing how much movement gets captured. And obviously, potentially the smaller the device, the more shake you're going to have. So it really can solve a lot of problems very quickly, and it can be quite dramatic. Is it going to solve everything? Probably not. You just have to try it. But it can amaze you. Now, once again, and I'm going to wind specifically to a frame that I noticed was just continuously blurry. It's this one here, all right? And you can just see it's not super ultra sharp. So for this, now we're going to implement the camera shake deblur. And I'm going to type in camera, and you'll see that it pulls up under the blur and sharpen menu here inside effects and presets. I'm going to drag this over top of the clip. Here is the before camera shake deblur. It's blurry. It doesn't look good. It analyzes and identifies motion blurred frames. It then uses optical flow technology to basically blend sharp frames on either side to give us a nice sharp look. And now, when I turn on camera shake deblur after 5 minutes of debacle, zzz, there it is. Sharp. Before, and look you can really see along the edges here, all right, around the clock. Take a look there. Before, after. Before, I'm looking at the playout. After. All right. Let's go to another one. Okay. Let's go to this one here. Once again, I'll go into our effects controls. So this is the before. You can see this one's basically illegible. You can't even read the numerals on the clock tower here. Can't see anything at all. Let's turn on camera shake deblur. Look at that. Look at that. Yes, and now we're peaking over 800 because you have to believe. Machine stuff, friends. I don't know why this stuff happens. It happens. Before, but this one is really super dramatic. If you're not, you should zoom in. After. Now, one of the things that you have here is you've got a couple of different options. So first of all, you've got the blur duration. Remember, it's analyzing frames from either side. So in this case, I found that giving it the most amount of frames, because there were probably a couple of slight blurred frames in between this really blurry frame, I used about a 9-frame sample. You have 5, 7, and 9. It's pretty subtle, and again, over the stream, you're not really going to see it, I'm sure. This is just, it's a little bit softer. And again, I'm zooming in here, so you're not really going to get to see everything as it should be. 9 frames, though, just gave me a slightly sharper, slightly clearer result. You've also got 2 deblur methods, standard and high quality. So high quality, again, it's going to be a little bit slower to process, but ultimately this is going to do the job for you. And then you have your strength and your shake sensitivity. Now, the sensitivity is by default around 50%. I increased it a little bit here because this particular clip, now let's see, hopefully this doesn't freak out. Let me just show you this one with nothing. So this was the pre-stabilized. Let me kill the audio here. This is the pre-stabilized. I mean, this is really shaky, right? It's just very, very, very handheld. Turn on the stabilizer, and it's just ultra smooth, right? Before, you can see the trees and just if you look at the sort of the ground there, or the bottom of the frame, it's really shaky. After, it's just smooth. So, these things, it really, like I said, it can do some magic. Let's go back to that super blurry frame right here, turn on camera shake deblur, and it just really does some incredible things. Now, as I always say, is this going to work on everything? No, probably not. You're just going to have to try it. The chat is very quiet today, but this can amaze you. Now, obviously, much like a lot of things where it's doing frame analysis, the render time on this can vary. So that's why I'm not rendering multiple frames right now. The key is, this can be one of those shot savers. This can save something that otherwise wouldn't have been usable and make it usable. All right? Cool? Awesome. Great. I'm glad we're done with this. Okay. All right. So let's talk now just a little bit about using just the stabilizer, and then we're going to go into a couple of examples in Premiere Pro as well. And maybe we'll start actually with this Buffalo one here. So once again, I've got some footage up here, new comp from selection. So this is some footage that I shot in South Africa a few years ago. Again, very handheld, of this buffalo here. And this is also flat, coming off of a Nikon D800. So once again, right click, warp stabilizer VFX, let it do its processing in the background. I don't need to do that because I've actually already made one that's finished for you. What I also did, and what you'll see here, is that I've added not only warp stabilizer VFX, but also the Lumetri Color panel to this, which of course is in both After Effects and Premiere. And by just doing a couple of basic corrections, and I think I added a LUT on here as well. Yep, so here's one of our Gold Rush LUTs. I did a little adjustment of the highlight tints, and that's about it. Take a quick look at this now. Kill the sound here. All right, wait until we get those frames kind of cached. So let me go ahead and turn everything off. So again, here's the pre-stabilized, pre-graded. Let's go ahead and turn on stabilized. Now you'll notice, of course, it had to scale up. And people always ask, why is that? Why does it do that? Well, again, because what's happening is that as the camera's moving, effectively you'd have black bars around the frame because you're not in 1080p anymore. You're not in proper 2160p. So you're going to have these black lines. So it has to actually scale it up a bit to fill the frame. Now, in this latest iteration, and let's go ahead and turn on Lumetri, you'll actually see that it scales up. It's able to do more with less. So when the first time we released Warp Stabilizer, we scaled up quite a bit. It's actually scaling quite a bit less now. That's, of course, fully adjustable. And you can see you even have additional scaling controls here. You've also got a couple of different options in terms of the result. And you can see you have options here to either smooth motion. So in this case, I kind of want to keep it, I want it to still look fluid. There can be some movement. The movement just needs to be smooth. Or you can actually do sort of a lockdown where there's no motion. Now, if I go ahead and change this to that, let's just take a look here. This was fairly steady. What that sometimes does is it can give you kind of a weird looking background. Let's play this back and see. Yeah, so you can actually see that now his face in the center is very steady, but his body and some of the background elements, getting weird errors today, are, well, yeah, you can see it's kind of like warping from the center. So no motion didn't really do it here. It looked better just smoothing the motion. Now, additionally, you've got different methods for stabilizing. Now, the default here is subspace warp. This one, though, again, it is actually, if you think of like what warping is doing or morphing, sometimes you can get sort of slightly out of perspective looking stabilized frames. So for this, I modified it to position, scale, and rotation. And you can the differences are usually very subtle. If I change this to subspace warp, you'll see it restabilizes. Let's play back again. And here, if I take off Lumetri, this will just go a lot faster. It's not bad. If you look at the horns here, they seem to be kind of, if there was a sound for what that would be, it would be sort of But if I go to position, scale, rotation, I just found that visually this one looked just a little more natural. Again, it kind of just smoothed out the motion, and his head is turning too. It's moving while I'm moving. So it kind of preserved all that, but just kept the shot steady, and then add that Lumetri color in there. And it really just pops and really looks awesome. You can see, I love how you can see like all the detail of the flies, on his nose and boogers, right? Let's bounce over now. Oh, I got to relaunch it to Premiere Pro and talk a bit about working with drone footage and maybe doing some corrections on drones, including stabilization. So again, very commonly today, a lot of people are shooting with drones, whether it's DJI, Phantom, or Mavic, or sometimes drones with a GoPro attached to them. There might be some things that you want to do. Now, this particular footage was shot in Iceland by my colleague Terry White. So thank you, Terry, for lending me this footage. And if you just take a look here, there's Terry and Scott Kelby. Move ahead a little bit here. I'm just kind of scrubbing through. I like this shot because you can really see that the horizon is decidedly bent, right? So now this is an older, I think he said this is 2 or 3 generations back in terms of the drone technology he was shooting with at the time. Now the motion on this one is pretty smooth. I don't see any real need to correct or stabilize motion. I do have another example that I'll show you in a moment where we're going to do just that. But what if we wanted to sort of correct the horizon here? Well, we can do lens correction automatically, very similarly to the way that you perform it in Photoshop natively inside of Premiere Pro. So if I go ahead and just drag my effects panel up here, let me just switch my view. All right. In the effects panel, you'll see that we have a preset folder. And in that preset folder, we have a lens distortion removal folder. So this is where we contain some of the presets for working with this particular footage. Now for this one, I'm actually going to choose this GoPro. I think this one actually looks the best. You can see there's also presets for DJI. I don't remember which Phantom. I suppose I could try the Phantom and see. And this media is 1080. So let me go ahead, let's try it. I haven't tried this one. Normally I use the GoPro. But the key is that I'm using a preset here. So I'm going to start with a preset which can then be modified. So let's grab the 1080, drag it right onto here, and right away you can see it flattens out the horizon. If we go into the effects controls, now inside of lens distortion, you see that you have options for adjusting curvature. If I drag this out, you can read all the text here. Vertical decentering, horizontal decentering, vertical prism, horizontal prism, and fill color, all right? So if that's a little too much, you see on the curvature here, I can actually adjust it. So here's where we started, right? And you can just use your eye here to kind of get this back to normal or however you want, all right? And it looks like, frankly, we could use a little bit of the motion effect to also kind of readjust the rotation here on this footage. But now we've got a nice, properly adjusted horizon. And just like in After Effects, I can say, let's turn this off. So there it is before, right? Totally curved. There it is after, corrected, okay? And this is real time. And by the way, you can also see that I'm even playing this on my machine here on my laptop. You can hear the fans going crazy. This is in full quality. So this lens distortion, this can be used for anything. The presets we have are for DJI and for GoPros, but you can use this on anything. Those presets are just a way to sort of get you started a little bit faster. Okay. So this is super useful. We've had this for several versions already. In fact, yeah, I'm going to back this off even more. That's the other cool thing. Whoops. That's the other cool thing is that you can continue to make adjustments as it's playing in real time. So this is just such a cool feature. Again, uninterrupted playback. Look at the bridge down here. Look at how bent the bridge is. And again, turn this back on and it's corrected. Okay. So lens correction, right? Common problems we encounter with video. Distorted, especially if you're using wide angle or fisheye lenses. Handheld shaky footage, come to the rescue with warp stabilizer. Blurred frames, motion blurred frames, come to the rescue with camera shake deblur. Now, something I want to point out, because again, I showed you and started this stuff in After Effects. So what if you're not really an After Effects user? You know, maybe you want to use that effect, but you actually want to do your editing and work on that stuff in Premiere. So I'm just going to show you one thing very quickly here. So from After Effects, if I go back to my project panel, and let's go to, if I wanted, or let's just go ahead and grab the camera shake deblur example. So this is called CSD 1840 After. That's the name of this comp. Using our dynamic link technology, which allows us to work with After Effects comps natively without rendering, I can bring this entire composition after applying this effect into Premiere simply by clicking and dragging. So if I take the composition, I'm left clicking and holding, I'm going to move over to Premiere, and I'm going to drop this inside of Premiere Pro's project panel. Okay. Now, if I double click on this, that will bring it into the source monitor. Give it a second to load the media. And there it is. Okay. Oh, and we've got our audio here, so I'm not going to worry about that. But I can now take this clip, and you can actually see in the tooltip, this is the After Effects project. So this is not a render. So this is a way for you to treat and work with things on the After Effects side, but bring them into Premiere Pro non-destructively. I can take this and drag this down into my timeline. Okay. Let's just mute the sound there. And there now I have that living inside of Premiere. So whatever you do on the After Effects side will be reflected here on the Premiere Pro side. You'll eventually want to save that comp, save that project on the After Effects side. So keep that in mind. But again, if we were to just go ahead and turn this off, it's a bit of heavy processing there, so give it a second to kick in. But it'll do just that. Okay. So let's just talk one more brief bit about working with stabilization. So this is kind of a cool tip to showcase to you. Sometimes when you apply stabilizers, it doesn't quite do the job, and you'll find that certain elements in your video can actually cause the stabilizer to freak out a bit. So this is another shot that I did of a lion in the grass. Now, the part of the shot that I really want is kind of right when he's turning his head. But you can actually see that before that, it's like super, super shaky. And then there's kind of a consistent bounce shake, okay? So the very shaky stuff is at the top of the clip. Then it kind of levels out. I do this nice little push. By the way, this was done handheld with a D800, or no, this was a Nikon D4 and a 400 millimeter lens. Why I was hand holding this, I have no idea, especially because the Jeep had like mounts, but I don't know. It was my first time doing a safari. So one thing that you can do when you apply the stabilizer, if you find that your results are just not working, trim the clip, trim the piece that you're actually trying to stabilize. So again, I don't really need all, these first couple frames at the top. I really kind of need it right when he does the turn. So if I just come to the side of the clip here, I'm just going to drag this and snap it to our playhead here. By the way, if you want to make sure that snapping is on, that's this little magnet icon here. If you don't have that checked, if that's not blue, it would not snap to the playhead. You can see when I just approach it, it just kind of snaps right there. This is a good way to keep things aligned. And then just drag this over. So now when I go up to effects controls, all right, and I drag in my warp stabilizer, which you can see I've already applied. So again, here's the before. Okay. Let's turn on loop for this, by the way. Here's the before. It's also flat. And here's the after. Okay. Very smooth. Even my push, look at the push here. It looks really good. All right, and let's let it wind back. And that's the shot right there. That's what I want. Okay. Let's look at that without the stabilizer. Okay. And here it is with. This can work on any kind of footage, whether it's, again, GoPro, Phantom, Mavic Pro, Airy, Red, vertical video, no matter what it is, you just have to try it. The results will vary, but they can really amaze you. And it can make something that was, kind of unusable suddenly look very nice and very cinematic. Okay? Pretty cool. All right, so just to point out a couple more things here, I talked about smooth motion versus no motion. This is something else that I want to show you here with regard to framing. So if we only stabilized, and I think this shot has enough movement. In fact, I'm gonna bring back the beginning so that you can kind of see. Oh, I did too much. Sorry. There we go. If I were to choose stabilize only, okay? If you now look at the frame. Can you see the black lines that are forming here? And by the way, these won't necessarily be symmetrical. They're kind of looking somewhat symmetrical now. But as I scrub through this footage, do you see that you see the frame moving around and you're seeing all the letterboxing, pillar boxing happening? Yes, because if it doesn't stabilize and crop and scale, that's what you would end up with. Notice the shot is beautiful and stabilized, but we have to scale it up. And you can see what it needed to do to fill the frame was to scale up approximately 112%. So that's why the default stabilize, crop, auto scale gets rid of that sort of those unwanted letterbox, pillar box artifacts and just, reframes the shot. Now, obviously, you're probably thinking, okay, well, what if I'm shooting super tight and close? Is someone's head going to get cut off when it stabilizes? Potentially. So again, you can manually adjust the scaling. Okay? That's why you have stabilize only, or stabilize and crop, stabilize, crop, and auto scale, or stabilize and synthesize edges. That's sometimes good if you just have a little bit that's kind of out of frame and it can do some magic there. But this is kind of pointing out where these controls are. Additionally, if you twirl down advanced, now this gets a little bit beyond sort of video 101. And this is something that not too many people encounter so much anymore. I guess you do if you're still shooting DSLR, but it's a little something called rolling shutter ripple. This is an artifact when you shoot with a DSLR, as you kind of pan side to side, sometimes it looks like the image is bending or skewing to the left or right via 5-10 degrees as you're moving left or right. That's known as rolling shutter or ripple. This effect by default has an automatic reduction for doing that. So if you have a shot that there's no motion blur, but it needs stabilization, but it has this thing when you're kind of panning where it actually looks like stuff is bending to the side, put this on, and then if it still isn't corrected, try the enhanced reduction. This can do some really amazing things to kind of fix that, okay? All right, and then again, on the After Effects side, you're just gonna see, if you were to look at, you have the same advanced controls, detailed analysis, rolling shutter ripple, but then you have even more with regard to sort of tracking points. You can even show all the points on screen that it's tracking for stabilization. Let's turn on the camera, shake Deblur again. So, just more detail, more data here, more that you can work with on the After Effects side, which is why it's referred to as Warp Stabilizer VFX. Okay, so let's now go into working with some LUTs, and again, we're going to go back to working with some of this drone footage. So this is sort of a before and after. This is, again, some drone footage. Now, this was shot with a DJI Mavic by my colleague Terry. And this is 4K content. And one of the things that I've kind of noticed with a lot of the drone stuff, again, it all depends on the lighting and everything, but sometimes it just looks a little too digital. And what if you want to kind of take the edge off? Take the digital edge off of that. Well, there's a lot of very detailed color correction techniques that you can leverage, but sometimes just by applying one of our film stock LUTs that you'll find, and these are basically color presets. LUT stands for, of course, lookup table. We have these built into the Lumetri Color panel. Let me go ahead and switch over to my color workspace here. And this is just going to give you a little bit more flexibility in kind of taking the edge off and just, changing kind of the character of the shot ever so slightly. So let me go ahead. I'm going to start from scratch, and then because we're almost running out of time here, we'll go to the final one. So I'm going to take this original clip, which, by the way, I think I've made some in and outs on this. Yes, I did. Okay. So let me go ahead and take this. I'll make a new sequence from that clip. All right. And let's go ahead and first, let's just play this back. Because we're shrinking this down to fit the window, it's looking a bit more pixelated and a bit more grainy than it actually is. Look a little less grainy if I go full screen here. But you can definitely see this kind of just has that, it's got that digital edge to it. It's beautiful, it's sharp, there's great contrast, but it's got some edginess to it. So with the clip selected, again, we can go into our Lumetri Color panel. And if you go into your color workspace, you're going to find this, where now you've got a couple of different options. So first and foremost, in the basic correction section of Lumetri, you have all the basic controls that you probably know if you've ever processed an image in Lightroom or Camera Raw. And this includes a white balance eyedropper, temperature and tint controls, exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, whites and blacks, and a saturation control. Additionally, if you're actually working with HDR content, if you click on the flyout menu here, you'll actually see that you can enable high dynamic range video. And then if you did that, now this is not HDR content, but then you get additional controls, including an HDR specular control and HDR whites. Okay. So this just gives you a little bit more flexibility in treating and doing the basic treatments on that content. So you can do some basic corrections here. So, if we wanted to just first kind of drop some of the highlights a bit, they're looking a bit just slightly blown out. I can see some definition up here. I don't know if it's coming through on the stream, but probably want to drop those a bit, maybe something like that. Additionally, maybe we adjust the contrast, kind of bring that down ever so slightly. Exposure looks good. Shadows, whites, blacks, you get the idea. Okay. But this is where it starts to get cool, in the creative section, because this is where we have a whole bunch of preset looks that you can apply and sort of instantly stylize your content. So here, you'll notice that there is an arrow. Now you've got the option again of using the drop down here, and we could start with something. Now CineSpace, this is going to make this look very crunchy and very, very high contrast. But I tend to like to take the edge off. I like these Fuji and Kodak film stock emulations. And what this refers to, why you see two names here, is that this meant that this is sort of simulating shot on Fuji film, printed on Fuji stock. Shot on Fuji, printed on Kodak. Shot on Kodak, printed on Fuji, okay? So if we start with one of these here, right away, it suddenly has just a different aesthetic. It looks, there's something warmer, richer about it. Still very high contrast here, but I don't know, there's just something really appealing about this. And what you'll notice in the creative panel here is that you've got obviously the intensity setting of that look, of that LUT. So you can adjust that. Here's without it. Here's, too intense. And you can kind of find the middle ground, all right? We could even maybe add some faded film, again, to give this, take a little bit more of that edge off and soften it even a bit more, kind of giving it a slightly lower contrast. Just making, again, the grain part of it is okay with me. It's just the trees were looking so crunchy. And now they're looking a lot less crunchy to me. Again, when we're fitting it inside this view, it's just looking more pixelated than it should. You can really see it very nicely. Here's sort of the before and the after there. And we can kind of keep moving through this. Let's just go ahead. I'm going to set this back to the defaults here. So here's another one. This is, again, Fuji Eterna 250D. This one I happen to like a lot. Again, just takes a bit of that edge off. Okay, kind of keeps cycling through. And by the way, when you cycle through and you find one that you like, here's some monochrome ones. I happen to think this Kodak 5205, Fuji 3510, I like this one a lot. Now you can really kind of see the green in the trees. It just takes a bit of that digital edge off. And we can adjust, again, with a little slight amount of faded film here, just to kind of give it a slightly lower contrast look. And don't forget, we can continually make changes up inside our basic correction. But one other thing that I wanted to kind of control here, or kind of handle, was the sky. I didn't love the sky up here, and I wanted to kind of see if I could maybe treat just this very blown out white looking sky. And in fact, we can, using a feature in Premiere Pro called HSL Secondaries. So what that's going to do, HSL Secondaries effectively allow us to adjust hue, saturation, and luminance of a specific color range inside of our video. And in this case, this blown out white sky. And then we can refine it, we can remove noise or blur it, or we can correct and recolor it. And HSL secondaries are commonly used to do color corrections for things like just skin tone. So let's say you do an overall Lumetri look to your video, but you want to, again, give skin tones a bit more punch, a bit more saturation. This is how you do that. So we start that by grabbing inside of the HSL secondary key section, the set color eyedropper, and we're simply going to take a sample of the sky here. Now, if I want to add additional elements of the sky, and by the way, I can turn on my mask. I'm going to click the plus eyedropper, and I'm going to click in the areas that I need to add back in. And the area that you see in white here is the area that's being affected by this color correction. The area that's in gray will not be, okay? So we want to kind of get that whole horizon in there, but make sure that we're just getting those sections. Now there's some reflections in the water of that blown out sky. So that's going to be affected too. That's okay, all right? We want that, all right? Let me just turn off my mask here. Yep, so I can go all the way down to the corners here. Again, I'm gonna add my plus eyedropper, grab over here, maybe one more, because I'm starting to see the trees through there. And I think that's pretty good. And the horizon, again, looks nice and sharp. You can see like the trees very clearly not being affected by that. So now we've got our mask, right? So at this point, let me go ahead and turn off the mask. I can come down to my refine section. Now, this might seem this might seem complicated, but again, if you work in design, you've done this on imagery before. Localized color clusters, same kind of thing, where we kind of get the mask, we set the key. Now we go and we can refine the key, so we can denoise or blur. Maybe we'll add just a little bit of blur on that, so it doesn't kind of look harsh against the horizon. So I'll do maybe a 0.3 pixel blur on there. And now I can simply make corrections. So if I know that I just want to adjust the basic temperature of this up here, I'm going to grab my temperature slider, and I'm simply going to drag this towards blue. All right, now I can go way extreme. That just looks fake. Maybe if you hadn't seen it before, you wouldn't know. It's starting to look a little fake in the reflections here in the water. So I'm just going to back it off a little bit, but maybe increase saturation, okay? And kind of find that middle ground. Pull in the correction here a little bit. Play this back. And it's looking pretty good. And once again, if I scroll up here, I can before and after the result. Now, again, look up at the top here. Because now the camera's moving, we got to set another area. So I can just take my eyedropper, click in that space, and fill in that section right there, okay? So this can be for like really quick and dirty sky replacements, just to kind of get rid of that white, blown out look. And if I take it further, if I scroll all the way down inside of Lumetri, now I'm going to go into Vignette. Now I can make this look super cinematic, okay? Just by adding kind of that standard vignetted look, okay? Very quickly. And again, if I were to go into Effects Controls, here's before Lumetri at all. Oh, and my machine's starting to chunk a little bit. By the way, I'm still in full. Normally I would be playing this back in quarter res. So here's before, here's after, before, after. Okay. with a simple LUT, making some basic adjustments to highlights and contrast, adjusting saturation, adjusting intensity, a little bit of faded film, and then using the eyedroppers to select specific color ranges, and then treating those specific ranges of color with the controls via HSL secondaries. And again, that's to be found inside the Lumetri Color panel. So the last thing that I'm going to show you in our last 8 minutes here is based around some audio fixes. First, a little bit of denoising, and then we're going to talk a little bit about so denoising and plosive removal. Here we go. Denoise, derumble. Thank you. All right. So here we have, again, this was an interview that was shot by a friend of mine, and this was shot outside. So if you take a listen to this, what you're going to hear is that there's some obvious background noise. Now, we've got the camera audio here on audio track 1, but we've got the secondary audio, which was captured with a lav mic here on track 2. So I'm not even bothering with the camera audio. It's thin and tinny. It doesn't sound very good. I don't need to correct that. This I'm actually going to treat here, which is the proper audio captured via this lav mic. Now for this, because we're going to start with the Essential Sound panel, I'm going to go up to my workspaces and choose audio. So let's click audio here. And remember, if you haven't seen this effect already, what's amazing about this new panel is this allows you to do incredibly powerful corrections without being an audio engineer. In this case, we break it down into 4 different types of audio: dialogue, music, sound effects, and ambience. So because this is dialogue, this guy talking in this interview, I'm going to choose dialogue, and it automatically gives me a whole series of effects and filters that I would commonly use to treat dialogue. So first, let's take a listen to this and kind of hear what's going on inside this clip.
Yeah, and how long have you been doing what you do?
My name's Rod Wyndham. I'm currently the Managing Director of Sabi Sabi, and I've been fortunate to be working here for 13 years. It's a long time.
Perfect. And what are some of the unique...
Okay, so you can hear that there's some like hiss, kind of like high-end, which I don't know if it's coming through on stream. It's very evident here, even on my speakers. So again, probably the gain wasn't quite properly adjusted on that lav mic. It's picking up a lot of high-end. It's also slightly, maybe a little overmodulated, meaning there's a little too much power. So again, the gain probably wasn't set correctly. But ultimately, there's just some background noise, which is okay. The birds tweeting and stuff, that's fine. But there's too much of that, and we want to get rid of that. So for that, we're going to use the repair section of Essential Sound, and we're going to focus on reduce noise. Now, also, you heard when he was talking, there's a little bit of rumble. There's a couple of sections there where there's just some like low end in his voice, because it's very close to his throat right here. And he's actually got a lot of low end fundamentals in his speaking voice. I'm just going to grab my headphones real quickly so I can hear what you're hearing a little bit better. I'm also going to turn down my speakers. And let's go ahead and first turn on the noise reduction. And what you're going to hear is that even though this has a single slider, this is going to analyze and basically adapt to the change in noise in this clip. You'll hear it kind of go and suck all the noise out. Take a quick listen. And we're going to start this with just the default value of 5.
So Rod, what is your name, your position here, and how long have you been doing what you do?
My name's Rod Wyndham. I'm currently the Managing Director of Sabi Sabi, and I've been fortunate to be working here for 13 years. It's a long time.
Okay. Now what I'm going to do real quickly is I'm actually going to mute my mic so you can hear that a bit more clearly. So I'll start with it on, and then I'll turn it off, and you'll hear what it's doing. Here we go. I'll mute myself real quick.
So Rod, what is your name, your position here, and how long have you been doing what you do?
My name's Rod Wyndham. I'm currently the Managing Director of Sabi Sabi, and I've been fortunate to be working here for 13 years. It's a long time.
Perfect. And what are some of the unique aspects about...
Well, being an avid photographer myself, we're blessed with wildlife that is habituated to game viewing. So you tend to get these really close-up one-on-one encounters with wildlife that pretty much is unique. Things like leopard and lion, Land Rovers on a daily basis, and are very comfortable with them being around us. So they go about their daily business doing what wild animals do.
Okay. So if you could hear right there, reduce noise, basic setting here, less or more. Now you can adjust these while it's playing back in real time. You will hear probably some stuttering or dropping out because what's happening is it's having to relearn and readapt. And what is actually happening is if you go to the effects controls and look at what's been applied, it's actually non-destructively applied our adaptive noise reduction effect to that clip. Now you never have to see this. As a first-time audio mixer, you don't ever have to go there. The one slider is going to do it for you. I'm showing this to you because what's awesome about this effect is that as you move this slider, it's not just sort of more or less noise reduction. If you're looking inside the clip, the effect panel right now, you can see that it's actually reconfiguring pretty much every slider in there to adapt to the changes. So it's not just this reduced noise by more or less. It's adjusting everything to kind of reconfigure that noise reduction. So a single slider, but very powerful tech under the hood. Similarly with reducing rumble, this is a really common problem where there's just kind of momentary, these kinds of things going on. This is applying our FFT filter. And once again, it's doing some pretty complex stuff in terms of the slope of the EQ that it's applying here in the filter underneath the hood. Now, the key with using this noise reduction, this hasn't been cut up or anything, is that you need to have a little bit of noisiness before the talking because it does have to adapt and you'll actually hear it kind of do that and denoise. So this is ideal for longer form sections. With a lot of short clips, I'd recommend going into our track mixer and possibly using one of our other noise reduction effects, either across the entire track you can use adaptive noise, or even one of our old school obsolete denoiser or spectral noise if you find that you're getting like weird in and out sounds of the noise reduction kicking in. Okay, and the very last thing I will show you here is removing plosives, popping Ps. This is something that a lot of people encounter, again, whether you vlog, whether you do anything with lavs or anything, very commonly encountered where you have those popping Ps. So this is a quick clip that I just made before doing kind of a little audio tutorial, and take a quick listen. Again, I'll mute myself. Actually, I don't even think I need to mute myself, but you'll hear where I have these markers in the clip right here. You'll hear that when I said Premiere Pro and then even the word sequence, there was a lot of air coming out and it actually kind of quickly distorted. Take a listen. And Adobe Audition CC, you can seamlessly move files from the Premiere Pro sequence directly into Audition. All right, and I'm gonna mute just because there's so much fan noise. Take a listen again. From the Premiere Pro sequence direct from the Premiere Pro sequence direct from the Premiere Pro sequence. Okay, so could you hear that kind of going on in there? All right. So the key there, of course, is that we want to be able to remove those plosives, but we don't want to change the sound. I obviously have a lot of low-end frequencies in my voice. So we need to just treat the plosive, the popping P, or in the case of sequence, it's just like that burst of air that hit the mic. Well, you can do that, and you can do that with this edit clip and audition functionality that we have between Premiere and Audition. Now, this is not a dynamic link. This is a destructive process, but it's non-destructive because when you send a clip, and in this case, I'm right-clicking or control-clicking from the Premiere Pro timeline, edit clip in Adobe Audition, it actually makes a copy in the Premiere Pro timeline. So your original actually remains untouched, okay? It's going to send this copy over to Audition. Get this out of here. Where you can see I've got those same markers that we just saw in Premiere. They carry over to Audition. And now that we're in Audition, if we play this back, right at these markers, you're going to hear those sections again. Sequence directly into Audition. Sequence directly into Audition. Pro, sequence directly into Pro, sequence, Pro. Okay, so how do we treat this? Well, if we zoom in, one thing you'll notice when you have popping Ps, plosives, you're going to see that the waveform looks broken. How do you know this is broken? Well, again, Pro. Now, this is another opportunity if you're an audio nerd like me. Pro.
Pro.
If you use the frequency analysis panel, which you can find under the window menu, you'll see that right when the cursor goes over Pro, you see there's this huge bump in low frequency info over here that just isn't there anywhere else. So you can visually identify where it is, but really the waveform itself, you can see this part looks weird. And if you highlight, you just want to highlight where that plosive is. That's the it's not, it doesn't extend over here. It's really this section right here. We're going to go up to Effects, Filter and EQ, FFT Filter. And now we're simply going to choose a preset called Kill the Mic Rumble. All right? And apply. And when you do that,
Premiere Pro, Premiere Pro, Premiere Pro.
Before,
Premiere Pro, Premiere Pro, Premiere Pro.
After.
Premiere Pro, Sequence, Premiere Pro.
All right? Fixed. Let's go to the sequence one here.
Sequence, sequence.
Okay, so it's on the qu. A lot of air coming out of my mouth at that point. So,
Sequence.
All right? So again, visually identify where that is.
Sequence.
Now, it's definitely this right here. Maybe I can even back it up a little bit more. Like that. Okay. Effects, Filter and EQ, FFT Filter. Kill the Mic Rumble has already been selected. Click Apply. Wind back.
Premiere Pro, Sequence, Premiere Pro, Sequence, Direct.
Okay, let's undo it.
Sequence, 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 sequence.
After.
Sequence, sequence.
And I could probably even get a little bit more. It sounds like it actually extended a little bit beyond that. My bad. That's okay. Just the section that we need. Reapply. Okay.
Sequence, Audition. And shit now sequence.
Nice. Okay. And now that I've made this change, because this started off in Premiere Pro, if I simply do File, Save, and I click back to Premiere, and you're going to see the timeline update very quickly. There it is down there. Now when I wind this back,
Pro, move files from the Premiere Pro sequence directly into Audition. Files from the Premiere Pro sequence directly into Audition.
It's corrected. All right. So we set it over to Audition, did the correction, go back to Premiere. It's corrected inside the timeline, and we're done. All right. Pretty cool stuff. So, my friends, what did we cover today? We covered removing plosives and popping Ps, denoising audio and de-rumbling audio. Even de-humming can also be done inside the Essential Sound panel. We also talked about applying color LUTs, color presets, looks to your video, whether it's drone footage or any kind of footage, to take some of the digital edge off or to do film stock style emulations. Also talked about using HSL secondaries to, again, treat specific color ranges in your video. This can be used for sky replacement. This can be used to adjust skin tones or, frankly, any color inside of a clip. An example I used to show is, you've got someone who's wearing a gray jacket or a red jacket and you want to make it blue. You can take a sample of just the colors of the jacket and refine and modify those using HSL secondaries. We also showcased a lot about using Warp Stabilizer and Warp Stabilizer VFX and all the different options you have to smooth, shaky handheld motion or to really lock a shot down to give it no motion at all with Warp Stabilizer both in Premiere Pro and After Effects, as well as the brand new feature in After Effects called Camera Shake Deblur, which again eliminates and tries to smooth over any motion blurred frames in your video with just a little touch of Adobe magic. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Jason Levine. We will see you again next time. Thank you.